The 90s was a great era for movies. It was a prosperous era for films of all genres. It was the rise of directors such as Wes Anderson, David Fincher, Richard Linklater, Spike Jonze, and of course Quentin Tarantino, who especially made a monumental splash in the 90s with films such as Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, which have had a weird comfort to them that you really only get from the 90s. The casual conversation in those movies are very memorable.
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
And often quoted even today, especially Royale with Cheese. But there is another movie that captures that comfort quite well. It's about a criminal and has some great dialogue. It also takes place in 90s LA. It even has John Travolta in it. Get Shorty. The movie Get Shorty from 1996 is a classic crime/thriller movie about a loan shark, Chili Palmer, trying to make it in Hollywood. The film was adapted from the book of the same name by legendary crime author Elmore Leonard, which is why it feels a little bit like a Tarantino movie, because of how massive an influence Leonard was on Tarantino, with him even saying that his script True Romance was basically ripped from Elmore Leonard.
Oh, I love Elmore Leonard. In fact, to me, True Romance is basically like an Elmore Leonard movie that he didn't write, you know?
And both films are pretty similar, plot-wise and dialogue-wise, despite them having different writers and directors. Tarantino was even arrested for trying to steal a book of Leonard's when he was young, and did later adapt his novel Rum Punch into Jackie Brown. Chili Palmer is a Miami loan shark who has beef with a fellow Shylock, Ray Barboni, or Ray Bones as he's called. It all started over a stolen coat worth
$379
and ended with Ray Bones having a scar on his forehead. Bones initially can't touch Chili as he's protected by a big mobster in New York, Momo, as explained by a fellow mobster played by Alex Rocco of The Godfather and Friends of Eddie Coyle. Momo unexpectedly dies and Chili has to answer to Ray Bones, who sends him after a widow to see if a recently deceased borrower, who died in a plane crash, or so he thought, can pay the loan back. And Chili ends up going to Las Vegas, then LA, to find this borrower. And as a favor to a casino, makes a visit to Harry Zim, a sleazy movie producer who makes monster mutant flicks and owes them money. But smelling opportunity, Chili and Zim team up, along with Karen Flores, a gracefully aging actress in Zim's movies, to get a star, Martin Weir, to star in their movie, the script of which he had previously flipped for. The only problem is getting Martin to star in the film, because he's known to flip about a script then unflip, getting the money to buy the script, as the writer's widow wants a pretty penny for it, and some coke dealers also want in on the deal, mainly Bo Catlett, the main enemy of Chili, along with Ray Bones, who wasn't too happy about Chili skipping Miami. The film, while containing a lot of criminal elements, is quite cozy to watch because of the humorous and relaxed tone of the film that we get from the writing, direction, and soundtrack. The idea for the movie came from real-life people that Leonard met, which is a strategy he uses in his writing, even using real people's names for a fictionalized version of the character. Could be someone who is like a professor at a university, and their name would be that of a character who's a drug dealer. Notably, Chili Palmer, who's a real guy, a former loan shark turned private detective who would give his borrowers a cold stare when they were struggling with their payments rather than threats of violence or violence itself, and just let them use their imagination, fill the blanks. The real guy also had to frequently go to Las Vegas, as many borrowers would go there in a last-ditch attempt to get some quick cash. Leonard's researcher, which is something he had, discovered when in Vegas that a lot of people from Hollywood spent time there, and that sprung the idea to make the story about a loan shark in Hollywood. Leonard had had experience in Hollywood dealing with those big shots, and used notably his experience with Dustin Hoffman in the failed adaptation of his novel La Brava, during which Hoffman got very excited about the project, according to Leonard's producer Walter Mirisch, but was more interested in talking about making the movie than he was in actually making it. So the film was never made, which is a shame because Scorsese was at one point set to direct, then Hal Ashby, and even Francis Ford Coppola was interested. Later on, the Coen brothers were reportedly developing it in the 90s, but it never came to fruition either. Oh, it could have been. Get Shorty was a success, even being near the top of the New York Times bestseller list, but it wasn't immediately optioned or adapted, which is odd because Leonard had his works adapted for decades, from 1957 with 310 to Yuma, 1967 with Ombre starring Paul Newman, Mr. Majestic in 1974 with Charles Bronson, Stick in 1985 with Burt Reynolds, and many more. He was no stranger to adaptations of his work, and with major stars helming the leads. So the book not being picked up right away was a surprise. Maybe Hollywood was unhappy because of how it portrayed Hollywood as a place where criminals could easily fit in, and how the criminal in the story was more honest than a lot of the film people. But nevertheless, an up-and-coming director did read it and liked it. The former cinematographer of the Coen brothers and director of The Addams Family and later on Men in Black, Barry Sonnenfeld, seeing it as a story of confidence with Palmer making it in Hollywood, partnered with Danny DeVito, who bought the rights before even reading the book. They got Scott Frank, who later on wrote and directed Queen's Gambit, to adapt the book into a screenplay. He was also later on chosen to adapt the Leonard novel Out of Sight, directed by Steven Soderbergh. Scott saw the story as a reinvention, because everyone was trying to be someone else, with Catlin and Palmer both trying to be producers, along with Flores, and then Zim, who's trying to be a producer of a higher pedigree. Frank made some considerable changes to the story, some usual stuff like condensing it down for time and took out characters, introduced some new ones, added new scenes, and shifted around others. But it still captures the spirit of the book quite well, maintaining the classic Leonard dialogue along with the atmosphere, which Leonard gave praise to as the adaptations beforehand emphasized the action a lot more, while in this film it strongly emphasized the dialogue and the characters. Nowadays, when you watch a film or TV clip on YouTube, or hear someone talk about a movie, they almost say that X actor was excellent in this or that, and that their performance was underrated and they deserve an Oscar or an Emmy. And it may be true and it may not, but I have to say that the casting and performances are really quite perfect in this, especially with Gene Hackman as the movie producer. He plays a sleazy, pouty pushover very well, which is the exact opposite of who he is in what he usually plays, and his performance is hilarious.
I'm gonna sit at the desk, and I don't want you to introduce me.
This is my associate, Chili Palmer.
Dennis Farina's performance is also great, as Ray Bones, who is able to play a character that is funny and menacing at the same time, a tricky balance to pull.
I'm gonna ask you one more time, then I gotta shoot you. You don't tell me what I wanna know.
Danny DeVito's hilarious as well, with his portrayal as an eccentric movie star who likes to order off the menu and flip about a script, then unflip. DeVito reportedly does an impression of Dustin Hoffman, and is just funny because he's Danny DeVito, and you have to try very hard not to be funny.
Oh, Martin, for Christ.
Rene Russo plays the gracefully aging actress well with a no-nonsense type of attitude, and is kind of the straight character of the film, the one who isn't full of Hollywood pretension and sees through everyone. Delroy Lindo is great as well. His character of Bo Catlett does have a menacing side, but like Palmer is enamored by movies, which is his ultimate folly. I especially like the scene where him and Chili are discussing the screenplay.
Why don't you and I, we sit down, we write the script over where it needs it.
You could write one of these.
There's nothing to it. All you do, you get an idea, you set down what you want to say on paper. Then you hire somebody else to fill in the commas and shit.
But ultimately, the gem of the cast is John Travolta for the role of Chili Palmer. He has the perfect amount of charm and charisma to be Chili Palmer.
It was absolutely a pleasure to meet you, Karen.
You believe he can be a loan shark, but you also believe he's a good-hearted guy because of that Travolta charm, which almost never came to be because, of course, the roles offered to other people from DeVito to even Dustin Hoffman. And Travolta initially rejected the role, and it took Quentin Tarantino, who he recently did Pulp Fiction with, to convince him to do it. And that's the only bit of Tarantino's involvement in this film. The only criticism of the performances I have is of Bo's henchman and former stuntman, Bear's southern accent.
Okay.
But otherwise he did a good job. Chili Palmer is surprisingly an aspirational figure. He's confident, firm, doesn't back down, and can handle a crisis. He's a ladies' man and also knows how to turn an enemy into a friend. He's a criminal, but not really a bad guy. He does give out big loans with high interest, but he knows how to handle his borrowers. Instead of threats or violence, he gives them a look, and that sets them straight. He doesn't even carry a gun most of the time. He loves movies and is knowledgeable of film trivia as well.
Wells didn't even want to do this movie. He had some studio contract he couldn't get out of.
The whole film is really about how this alpha male, seeing an opportunity for a better life, uses his confidence and charisma to succeed. It's inspiring all of us who want to do better in life. With what Chili can do with handling Bo, Bones, and charming Weir, Flores, and Zim in the process. He also has an almost zen attitude, like the line,
Well, I was scared then, not now. How long you want me to be scared?
just don't steal his coat. Barry Sonnenfeld was a good choice to direct this movie, due to its comical nature, and he had a talent for that, as seen in The Addams Family and Men in Black. He took the script and added his comedic touches, the way he shot the Momo heart attack scene, which was originally written for drama, having Chili drive around in a minivan instead of a Cadillac, which is then amusing to see how the minivan becomes cool because of how cool Chili is, or how the lunch scene, Danny DeVito, was changed for a more comedic tone that fit the movie better. Instead of just being Ware ordering off the menu for himself and them having a lunch, he orders off the menu for everyone and orders a saltless egg white omelet and strawberry frappes. He then proceeds to spew the dialogue and then leave, which is a lot more funny and better for pacing than them just have a full lunch. Sonnenfeld was pretty strict about the dialogue and didn't like the actors improvising. Maybe a trait picked up from the Coens, but also because Leonard's dialogue is so good it doesn't need improving. Minus the book, the film came from three things: Scott Frank, the screenwriter, the cast, and Barry Sonnenfeld, the director. It was a great concoction of people to make a delicious movie brew. All elements did their job well, and what we got as a result was one of the best comfort movies of the 90s. There is even later an inferior sequel called Be Cool, and a TV show with Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd. But the movie is something quite special that you can watch over and over again. It's really quite comforting, especially with the soundtrack.